Welcome back. The Trump administration has claimed the Biden administration improperly distributed climate change-related funds to organizations it calls undeserving.
You are listening to Climate Court Voices, a podcast where we speak with the individuals leading crucial climate lawsuits and championing environmental justice efforts worldwide. In this episode, I speak with Brooke Durham. She is the Director of Communications for Climate United, one of 8 companies that were awarded a $20 billion grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency under former President Joe Biden last year. The money was part of the EPA's $27 billion Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, a national program under Biden's signature climate law, the Inflation Reduction Act. It was designed to attract both public and private capital to combat the climate crisis by tackling things such as pollution and air quality and lowering energy costs. The 8 organizations that were awarded the $20 billion grant were tasked with building a national network of community lenders that would finance clean energy projects nationwide, specifically targeting low-income and disadvantaged communities. In February, the money was abruptly frozen at the Trump administration's request after Lee Zeldin, the new EPA Administrator, suggested that the grants were vulnerable to fraud.
I'm Brooke Durham. I'm the Director of Communications for Climate United. We are a public-private investment fund removing financial barriers to clean technology so that every American can benefit from good-paying jobs, lower energy bills, and better public health. As a coalition, we have over 30 years of experience deploying capital, both in the private markets and in the public sector. And so our focus really with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund was to free up capital and drive it to places that need it most. So that in plain speak, really we're making loans to small businesses, communities throughout America for things like solar, building decarbonization, electric transportation. And we applied for this grant because we have a strong track record of doing that. So we applied for the EPA grant in 2023. It was a very long and competitive process. The EPA actually encouraged us to form coalitions. That was like part of the program requirements or advice was to work together. And so we brought together the superstar coalition of people and went through the entire application process. We were awarded $6.97 billion in April of 2024, and those grants were fully dispersed last year.
Climate United partnered with 3 nonprofit financial institutions to manage the grant. Together, they were planning to invest in harder-to-reach market segments like consumers, small businesses, small farms, community facilities, and schools. They committed to allocate 60% of investments to low-income and disadvantaged communities, 20% to rural communities, and 10% to native communities across America.
In September of last year, we got to work making loans. Our first loan was for a solar project in Arkansas. And we have multiple sites throughout the state in partnership with the University of Arkansas system and a local solar developer in Arkansas to help deliver lower energy bills and clean energy to rural America. And that was just the beginning. And so we hit the ground running with several different programs. We had an electric truck financing program that was designed to help small and independent owner-operators buy or lease electric drayage trucks, so like tractor trailers that are carrying things to and from ports. We know that port communities are disproportionately impacted by air pollution, and that deploying electric vehicles in those spaces not only reduces operational cost for small businesses who don't have the capital to buy an expensive electric truck up front, but also delivers those local health and economic benefits to the community.
Climate United also launched a pre-development grant program to provide technical assistance to small communities and nonprofits in becoming capital ready. These communities and nonprofits would receive grants to use for anything that would help them develop robust projects that can attract an influx of investment capital, from project planning and feasibility or environmental impact studies to community engagement and even technical assistance for funding opportunities.
And so all that happens, this is all 2024, right? The Trump administration is elected, and our perspective is that we have a binding contract with the Environmental Protection Agency, who's administering the grant program. We have our grant funds in our bank accounts. Those bank accounts have EPA oversight, but they're still like in our names. So you have several grantees across, we're just one grantee of a $27 billion program. So everyone has, all these grants were required to be obligated and dispersed by a certain time. And we're rolling, and thinking we're going to work together with the new EPA. It'll be maybe some things will change. Maybe we'll have conversations about what kind of investments they want us to make, within the requirements of the statute that was passed by Congress, of course. And so, we kind of kept going into the new year and continue with our investment strategy and continue to execute on our work plan that we made with the EPA the year before. And after inauguration, on February 12th, we hadn't heard much of anything from leadership at the EPA until a video was posted on X by Administrator Lee Zeldin.
Hi, this is EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. An extremely disturbing video circulated 2 months ago featuring a Biden EPA political appointee talking about how they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic, rushing to get billions of your tax dollars out the door before inauguration day. The gold bars were tax dollars, and tossing them off the Titanic, but the Biden administration knew they were wasting them.
Where he not only announced his intention to claw back the $20 billion climate financing grants that were already obligated and dispersed.
I directed my team to find your gold bars, and they found them. Now we will get them back inside of control of government as we pursue next steps.
But at the same time, made a lot of claims that have proven to be false, that the program is riddled with conflicts of interest and fraud and waste and abuse.
Roughly $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposely designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight.
He mentioned Climate United by name in that video.
This pot of $20 billion was awarded to just 8 entities. Just under $7 billion was sent to one entity called the Climate United Fund. Here's my position as EPA Administrator. The financial agent agreement with the bank needs to be instantly terminated, and the bank must immediately return all of the gold bars that the Biden administration tossed off the Titanic. EPA needs to reassume responsibility for all of these funds. We will review every penny that has gone out the door. I will be referring this matter to the Inspector General's office, and will work with the Justice Department as well.
And so, as you can imagine, it triggered not just a crisis in terms of funding, because our funds were frozen immediately after that, basically, but also this reputational crisis, right? Where we have like thousands of Americans who now, because they've heard a leader say something about us and taken it to be true, it's like a snowball effect, really, of misinformation that started from that moment on.
Zeldin's theory that the Biden administration stashed $20 billion worth of gold bars in a Citibank account was spurred by a video shared by right-wing organization Project Veritas in December that showed a former EPA staff member explaining how the Biden administration rushed to disburse billions in grants ahead of Trump's inauguration, comparing the rush to tossing gold bars off the Titanic. But these gold bars were congressionally appropriated funds from Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, meant to be distributed to small non-profit lenders that focus on energy efficiency and clean energy projects, several of which are in Republican-led states. They were legally committed before the November 2024 presidential election and deposited into recipients' accounts at Citibank, which agreed to act as intermediary between them and the government. Citibank froze the recipient's bank account at the government's request shortly after Zeldin posted the video, leaving dozens of projects in limbo.
We first heard from the video on X. So, most of us had put our kids to bed that night. It was like 8:15 or so when the video was posted. And we had no idea before that moment that this program was going to be under attack. We received a letter, I think the next day. I'm not sure exactly what that. It's like such a blur. It was so shocking. But we did try on numerous occasions to reach out to Administrator Zeldin, to reach out to EPA leadership in the days and weeks following that, and never got a response. Just complete silence.
On March 8, Climate United filed a lawsuit against the EPA, Zeldin, and Citibank to regain access to the grant funds. The lawsuit addresses several of Zeldin's published statements expressing hostility to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund program and behind-the-scenes efforts to cause Citibank to withhold Climate United's funds. The lawsuit reads, Climate United has never articulated any legal justification for its refusal to honor the account control agreement. None exists. It goes on to say that the agreement does not allow Citibank to withhold Climate United's grant funds unless EPA has given notice that it intends to exercise exclusive control over the accounts. But the lawsuit argues that the EPA has not done so, and continues by saying that it cannot possibly do so because there is no legal justification for such an action. It also talks about the real and immediate harm the Climate United suffered as a consequence of the grant freeze. It warns that without the grant funds, it will quickly run out of cash to pay operating expenses such as staff, rent, critical service providers and contractors, and it will struggle to meet its commitments under the loans and awards it had already approved.
We did hire staff to administer the grant as soon as basically when funds were dispersed in 2024, we started building out, executing our hiring strategy, which entailed over 100 new employees across the coalition to be able to deliver on the terms of our work plan, which was to deploy a lot of capital in a lot of different sectors across America. And so I think we had gotten about halfway through that hiring process. And keeping in mind, there's 3 distinct organizations here, right? So each organization had hired respective staff. I believe it was 50 or 60 total when the funds were frozen. And so there's been major impacts. I mean, we've laid off the vast majority of our staff at this point. There are very few people still employed either by Climate United directly or even like our coalition partners have had to adjust their staffing. We've had to terminate contracts with agencies and different contractors who are providing additional support services. It's been really hard. As you can imagine, this was a dream job for so many people who have been working in the clean energy and climate space. Is a historic opportunity, right, to be a part of. It's not just an initial investment in climate in the States. It's like a one-time investment that's expected to grow quadruple, triple, 7 times over a decade. And so the opportunity to be a part of something impactful was really exciting for a lot of us. And so for that to be taken away, at least temporarily, right? There's certainly opportunity and potential that this program, and we believe it will be restored to some extent, but it's not right now, right? It's not soon enough to preserve the jobs and just the existence that we had before as an organization. But I think most of us are really heartbroken over the communities who are counting on these funds. They are the ones who are really hurting right now. This program passed in 2022. All these investments were promised to communities who direly need the capital. Like traditional finance is not lending them the money to get these projects done. And they have crises on their hands, like energy affordability and pollution and a lack of economic mobility. And this program was designed to remedy those issues while building a market and transforming the market for clean energy and electric transportation and driving down costs for all of us, right?
One project that was selected to receive funding was the native village of Port Hayden, a highly remote off-grid community in southwest Alaska. They were planning to perform pre-feasibility studies to estimate energy generation and costs for 2 hydropower systems. Testifying before Congress in September, Port Hayden's president said that for his village and many native communities in Alaska, further oil and gas development offers no benefit. Their remote location means they are too distant from the pipeline and they rely on expensive diesel that must be refined elsewhere and imported back, often costing upwards of $7.49 per gallon. Instead, the community believes its true energy independence lies in harnessing abundant local resources, such as year-round wind, summer solar power, and nearby fast-moving creeks for hydropower. They conducted studies that showed that these renewable sources could satisfy about 75% of their energy demands, providing reliable, local, and inexpensive power for their homes, tribal infrastructure, and essential municipal services. And that's exactly what Climate United's money would have helped them achieve, one step at a time.
And so I think when all this happened, yes, absolutely not fun, grueling to have your name plastered on news articles and on broadcast and X. The emails we received have been horrible, from some people just threatening, it's been hard on a personal level, but all of us are here for the work, right? And for the mission. And that's really what's at stake here. It's communities in Alaska who are, paying an absurd amount of money for diesel generators. And they don't have any other way to improve their quality of life and to reduce their living costs without clean energy. And not just this program, but so many others, right, have kind of pulled the rug out from underneath projects like those. And it's in every corner of the country, and so that's hard. So from where we're sitting, some of our projects have been able to move forward. The vast majority did not have much capital drawn down. And so a loan was closed. A borrower might have drawn down a fraction of what was closed because it's like drawn as it's needed. And then a lot of loans were committed or just about to close before the funds were frozen. And that's really true, especially for looking more broadly at the program. There are a lot of awardees who are just on the cusp of launching programs or closing loans that would have been really transformative. If we had had like another month, I think we would have seen a lot more capital flowing. But it just happened so quickly after the inauguration.
What were meant to be frantic months working around the clock to get the money where it's needed have been replaced by the slow, frustrating grind of legal bureaucracy, as Climate United waits for its lawsuit to move to the next stage. The Justice Department and the EPA's Acting Inspector General opened investigations into the grants, but so far the agency has not provided evidence to substantiate Zeldin's claims of fraud and waste. If it did, it would open up a legal way for the government to recoup the money. In court, the agency provided a different legal argument, saying it can cancel the grants because its priorities have changed, an explanation the new administration has often used to justify cuts to environmental programs and targets. In April, a federal judge ordered a preliminary injunction barring EPA and Citibank from clawing back the funds. But in September, the three-judge panel at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit overturned that injunction. In a 2-1 ruling, judges said that most of the plaintiffs' claims were contract disputes to be discussed exclusively in the Court of Federal Claims, not the District Court. The two judges who made up the majority vote, Naomi Rayo and Gregory Katsas, are Trump appointees who also worked in the first Trump administration. The only judge objecting the decision, Obama appointee Judge Nina Pillard, wrote in a dissenting opinion that the two judges' decision effectively allowed the government to seize plaintiffs' money based on pretextual allegations and to permanently gut implementation of major congressional legislation. The EPA hailed the ruling, with an agency spokesperson saying the plaintiffs were wrong to act so entitled to these precious public funds that belong to hard-working American taxpayers. Shortly after, Climate United and other awardees filed a rehearing petition, appealing the DC court panel ruling. Should the case move to the Court of Federal Claims, the 5 organizations that brought the claim will lose any chance to reinstate the grants and will only be able to sue for damages.
We are fully focused on the legal battle with the EPA as a coalition, as Climate United. The coalition itself has respective entities and parent organizations that obviously still have their portfolios of work. And so those things are moving forward. And some of our partners are doing an amazing job of using the pipeline of projects they had and just finding other capital sources. So those projects are still happening, but not with the grant dollars. So we can't, I mean, even litigation, there are no grant dollars available to us. And so litigation has to be privately financed or privately fundraised for. And so we're doing that and marching on there. But by and large, there's not much we can do under the Climate United umbrella aside from fighting to get funds unfrozen. So we have currently appealed this decision. We petitioned for an en banc rehearing, which would be the full panel of judges in the appeals court. They are not granted often, but I think a lot of our lawyers feel confident that there's a good possibility that could be granted. So what happens that there's several different, it's kind of like a stream, right? There's several different pathways that the case could go down. But if, let's just say that is re-granted, it would be many months before that rehearing takes place. And the full panel of judges would rehear the case and would rule on that. And then the EPA could, depending on what the ruling is, the EPA could appeal to the Supreme Court. And then we would be in SCOTUS. But it takes some time, right? So we're looking at the next 9 to 12 months, those next steps unfolding.
Legal experts say the case is testing the limits of the Trump administration's ability to claw back federal money that has already been committed. For Brooke, it will also be interesting to see what kind of legal precedent this case sets for future recipients of federal grants.
If they do side with the EPA, I think it has interesting implications for whether or not someone can take a federal grant in the future and trust that it's actually going to be delivered on, right? Because unlike other grant freezes where funds were obligated, ours were obligated and dispersed. And, you know, they were in our bank accounts. They were out the door of the federal government. And so the effort to call them back and to have at least some success in the court was saying that, well, that's okay that you went about it that way, I think is really interesting. And yeah, we'll see. I think there's been a lot of grant freezes this year already that will probably give a lot of people pause about working with the government in the future. But it's fascinating to think about the idea that money that's left to the government can come back if they decide that they wanted to, despite what the law says. Because remember, the time that all this happened, this was a statute. Like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the EPA had a statutory obligation to administer the program that they didn't deliver on earlier this year, right? And they have their arguments for that, you know. But all that to say, we'll see how it plays out. It'll be an interesting case, especially if it ends up in the Supreme Court, whether or not they'll take it, how they'll rule, and what precedent that will set going forward. But we do feel confident that we have a strong case, and there's a lot on the line here. So fingers crossed.
Thank you for listening, and see you next time.